Monica Graham, and yes, like Steve said, I run Most Ancient. We mostly make printed books and virtual worlds, and I'm going to be talking to you today about Diatribes. This is a project I've been working on for a while now. It's a VR project, and it's a surreal narrative adventure that explores fears about climate change inside this virtual mindscape. And it's really an example of me and my team's experiments with poetic world building and how you tell story through touch and choice. And so I'm gonna go into that in more detail today. This is my team. These are the crazy people that decided to work with me on this project, and they're great. I'm the director, writer, 3D artist. Julia Kim does the music, all the sound stuff. Holly Newlands does the gameplay, the programming, technical artist, and Charlene Chen is the creative lead and 2D artist. We all sort of contribute on different levels to each other's side of the project. It's a real collaborative spirit. Most Ancient is about collaboration. It's really the reason why I do art. So these VR projects, these books, they're gonna fade with time, but the relationships you build, I think, are the things that will keep growing. So this is sort of the history of Diatribes. So these projects don't just get made. They need to be funded. They take a lot of time and effort to make them. So it's kind of grown in fits and starts. And first was the Media Fellowship at Kala, which was a small budget, and we were able to sort of think about the surrealist sort of environments we wanted to build. But that was kind of the limits of that scope. And then we moved on to, I got into the Launchpad program at Meta and was able to really design, think about the story and how this world contains that, and design a vertical slice for that, which is kind of like a slice of the pie. And from that, we got a bigger grant, and that is what has funded what I'm gonna show to you today and what we've been working on for the last year. So it's still in the prototype stage, so these are all sort of prototypes of scenes. Is a work in progress, but we're close. So what I wanted to show to you here is in the beginning you meet the narrator, and I think the important part about the narrator is that there's sort of this self-help guru, fortune teller character, and I put some of my visual sort of inspirations for that here. And you can only activate the narrator by feeding it coins, so there's this choice that the player has to make. If they want advice, they have to pay for it. And the narrator will give them advice, sometimes practical advice, but as they feed more coins, it kind of devolves into these diatribes and these rants. And as the face spins, it generates different facial expressions. So another thing that's a big important part of this world that we're building is touch. Really, when you're in VR, that's what you want to do. That's how you experience the world. It's almost like a baby that wants to put everything in their mouth. That's the average player in VR. So one thing that if you're doing something a lot in VR, it's really important that it's a satisfying feeling. And in this world, you're moving through these scenes, and each scene represents like a feeling, like a layer of your mind. So you're peeling back or ripping through or scrubbing a space to move on to the next section or the next emotion or feeling. So it's we wanted to represent this mental landscape in the interactions in the world. Okay, so you start out in this, what's called the avoidance room. And here is really thinking about how we avoid the issue of climate change by indulging in the present moment. So it's really a space about consumerism. There's this endless buffet that the player can grab food or drink off of and indulge in, and they can throw their waste into this recycling in this waste section. So there's this feeling like you're doing something, but there's these glasses also that you can put up to your face, and when you put them up to your face, you see this other reality, which shows the effects of your consumption in the space, and eventually that kind of takes over. So really just thinking about how these objects, these artifacts or props can tell the story. And one thing in your mind, there's this feeling of multiplicity. So how we feel multiple emotions at once or experience multiple things at once. And we wanted to represent that in these props. Another thing is these transitional spaces. So the world is made up in these rooms, and you have certain tasks or meditative games that you play, but in between that, there's sort of these spaces that are there to remind you that it's like a dreamscape, and also to reinforce the themes of climate change through the environments and the props in them. And really in these spaces, you can only move forward. You can only sort of move from point A to point B. Around you, there are these two gods, which you saw their heads earlier in the like branding art, and these gods represent civilization and nature, and they're sort of having this battle in the background that's constantly going on, and you're kind of hearing it. It's in the atmosphere, but it's not in your foreground. So this idea of how we feel things, sometimes in a very myopic way, and other times it's just sort of in the background, and it's sort of this thing that is affecting us, but we're not fully aware of it always. Okay, so this is a closer look at one of the transitional spaces, just to look at some of the inspiration. This is a project I've been working on for a while, so we've really been gathering content to kind of look at. And this idea of like Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole, very much a theme we're trying to convey in this experience. Also like Willy Wonka, Chocolate Factory, it's like very typical of the same type of story that we're telling, where you go into these spaces, these children to have different interactions, and then there's these in-between spaces, like on the boat ride, if you've seen that movie. It's a good one. And then Fritz Lang, who did a lot of early film, like Metropolis, looking to them, it's really interesting to look at art forms in their beginning stages when you're looking at VR, because you have to learn how to do a lot with very little, and it's a good lesson or a good research source to look at, and so those films have been a resource. The Blind Hope Room. So this room is about this idea of thinking that there's one solution. So instead, like, you can't just pump up this inflatable thing and it will solve the problem. You have to keep working on it. So to really address the issue of climate change, it's a constant tending to our environment, a kind of reacting to its needs, and we convey it through this inflatable object in a habitat that the player has to inflate, and if they let go, it deflates, so there's just a constant effort on the player's part in this room. And one of the inspirations for that was Paul Chan's Breather series. That's a really great sculpture where it's kind of modeled after the inflatable figures in front of like a car sales lot or something. We've all seen them, and how they're just like constantly trying to stay up. It's this struggle, right? This is another one of the transitional spaces, and here I just wanted to show you, like I said, they represent sort of climate change, so it's this submerged, flooded space. You're also, what I wanted to kind of convey in this one is this idea of doom scrolling. So you're moving down this boat path, and you can stop or move forward whenever you want, and to the side there's these fear-mongering posters related to climate change around you. And I also have made these posters, I've screen printed them, so I'm really interested in my overall practice to think about how things can exist in the virtual world and also the physical world, and how that space kind of bleeds together. And so these artifacts can kind of be in both worlds. Okay, so this is the Mourning Room, and here is it's a monument to the lives lost because of the mass extinction caused by climate change. So it's a room that really explores the sadness around climate change that we feel. You play this meditative game that is there to kind of help you grieve the loss. It unlocks a story, one like personal story about climate change. And then when that phase, it's a two-phase room, so when you go to the second phase, it's these rotating murals. And the murals kind of represent different passages of time. And some of these passages of time are more immediate, and some of them are in the very distant future, and really thinking about time on this universal scale, because I think that's another sort of emotion of like, people may exist, they may become extinct, animals may exist, others may survive, you know, like it's this idea that the earth is going to be here, and maybe we're just one blip on it, and in some way that can help us process what's going on right now, to kind of look at the big picture sometimes. Yes. So this is an example of the mural moving, a kind of prototype of how it operates in the space. So it's if you've seen these out, there's some billboards that are tri-panel billboards that do this same sort of function, and we're just recreating it in a virtual space. So then there's the ending, and the ending, and this is in this experience that we're building right now. This is where the player makes the final steps, and it's kind of like you're in this vortex, and it's a release. It's a letting go of the feelings and emotions you've just passed through, and then you enter into this reflection room. And in the reflection room, there'll be objects from the journey you've gone on, and if we're able to expand the world, there'll be maybe branching paths. So those objects in that final room would be different. Depending on what path you take. Here the narrator will ask you some questions about your experience. In your hands, throughout the experience, your hands are these reflective shard mirrors, and they're always mirroring the space you're in. And in the final scene, it will kind of activate in a different way. Yeah, so that is all the phases of the world as we're building now. And now, what do we need? I think the biggest thing right now is that we need to grow our audience. We need playtesters. We're at this point where we've built a lot of it, and it's ready to kind of get out in the world and be tested and see how people are reacting and kind of perfect it. We also need followers, people watching what we're doing, spreading the word about this project. Festivals and fairs, we'd like to see it in exhibitions. Right now, a lot of the promotion kind of falls on me. We don't have a producer on the team, and at the end of the day, when I'm building this stuff, I don't have a lot of energy left for that. So however we can get it out and as much impact we can, and with whoever's help would be great. And then financial support, always essential. We need to expand the world, polish the world, make it presentable to put it out in the world. We need to find a publisher. The saddest thing about these projects, I teach VR at Stanford, and a lot of my students, I can't show them a lot of narrative VR projects because they never make it past the festivals and fairs. They're never distributed on these platforms. So we really don't want that to be the case with this project. We want to get it out in the world. We want it to be published. We want it on multiple platforms. But all that takes money and time beyond what we've already done. So finally, this is an amazing team I'm working with. I can't express how good it is to talk to them about VR and to work and do these things. And I'd love to make more projects with them. So, yep, this is my contact info. Thank you.